All right, in our call out this week, we wanted to discuss the arrest of Sean Diddy Combs, and not just the concept of, okay, here's some crazy stuff and lube, and this guy was wilding out and everything like that. But there was something that one of his old bodyguards said, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with the story, but just he's been arrested, serious charges, trafficking, all types of stuff in terms of connected with these freak off parties that he's had. And this is federal, charges, and the feds usually don't mess around with this stuff. So he looks to be in a lot of trouble. But his an old bodyguard of his said that, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially that he thinks that the music industry made Diddy into a monster, and that this wasn't the Diddy necessarily that he saw at the very beginning, but he saw like a change in him progressively. And so it's an interesting point to bring up. I don't think that even if it's 100% true, it would absolve Diddy of his behavior. But the question more so that I want to get to is whether or not do we have, kind of an industry that can turn people into monsters, or a celebrity culture that can turn people into monsters? Like, is this something we should be more worried about if people are claiming that, hey, it takes people that are regular people and turns them into monsters that are terrorizing people like that? Maybe, again, not setting aside, like, if whatever he's done, if it's proven, he needs to be punished for it. But is there anything we can do from a cultural standpoint moving forward so that we don't keep creating monsters if this is the case? So thoughts, Tunde. What do you think on this idea?
So hold on. We're going to say that Diddy's a victim of a big bad industry, and he used to be, I think he was a choir boy that used to go out of his way to walk little old ladies across the street and help them with their groceries before he before he touched that.
So what I want to point out, though, just for the sake of the audience, what you just saw there was the definition of a straw man. And so, because it doesn't have to be that he was a choir boy before that. So to say, oh, he was a choir boy before is to create something to then knock it down. The question is just whether or not was he this? Was he Mr. Trafficker?
Well, I mean, that's kind of why I start with the joke, because first of all, we don't know. There's going to be a lot.
That's why we're going off of what somebody said. Somebody who did.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I'm going is I tend to not feel that these industries bring out the worst, like take good people and turn them into really something that they're not, or terrible. I'm not saying that hasn't happened. I'm just saying I don't think that it's automatic that you just go into this industry and that happens, because number one, that means everybody would behave like that. When I think, like any other statistic, if we look at how many people get accused of what Diddy's been accused of versus the thousands of entertainers that are out there, it's still a smaller percentage. And then we see similar things where there's men who make a lot of money and there's fame. And we see that in areas where there's men who make a lot of money and maybe there's not a lot of spotlight or fame. So, example, all professional sports have had these kind of stories, maybe not as, like you said, about the human trafficking and the all that stuff, the RICO charges.
We've seen it in sports. We've seen it in politics. We've seen it with televangelists and religious.
That's what I was going to say. Exactly. Jimmy Swaggart in the 80s when me and you were kids, to Jerry Falwell Jr. now, the reason why he got kicked out of Liberty University for his behavior. We could talk about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump.
So your thought, though, is what? That this is all, that these people are just individuals, and the fame and the nobody telling you no doesn't contribute to creating these people, to making these people worse.
What I'm saying is, I'm not going to say it doesn't contribute. I think that's a very important way to say it. I'm going to say that I think there was this side of their personality must have been latently in them already, whether it was someone who overtly showed it prior to being famous, or that it came out once they got the money and maybe the grandiosity. Because what I'm saying is there's a lot of people who've made that kind of money who are famous that don't behave like that. So it's not just a correlation.
And to your point, there's people that behave like that. There's also people that behave like that aren't rich and famous and everything. I mean, they just get caught quicker. Yeah, they aren't able to get away with it for years, because they don't have the resources and or the celebrity to get away with it.
There's hedge fund managers on Wall Street that get busted for being pedophiles or for raping women. We know about, unfortunately, the Catholic Church has priests that have hurt children. We know about the guy at the Michigan guy from the Olympics. Remember that he was molested?
But
he wasn't famous, in the music industry.
Well, I think the music industry being an avatar for the fame and so forth. But also, what was specifically said is that Diddy was around people that behaved like this, And he when that Bodyguard is talking about at the time period, Diddy didn't behave like that, but he saw Diddy start imitating and taking on these behaviors of other figures. Which,
but that's still on
have
him.
the article.
I mean,
well, let me talk though. But to me, I think that what you're looking at here, and I think there's something to what the Bodyguard's saying. But again, I don't think it relates to excusing or anything like that with Diddy. I think what it is basically is that it's really hard to be a good person. I would say even in your industry, the financial industry, it's really hard to be a good person. And what would we consider a good person? An honorable person, somebody who, if given the opportunity to do something wrong, if you think you will get away with it, to still not do something wrong. I think that is exceptional. And so what we're seeing here, really, with all of these examples we're given, is that some people are going to do bad stuff no matter what setting. So you got that bucket, and that person, if they're a celebrity or they're, in the music industry or sports or whatever, they may get away with it. Or if they're in the Catholic Church or whatever, they may get away with it for longer because of these connections and these positions that they're in. But they're just in a situation where they're going to do bad stuff. Then I think you have this middle where they can be influenced to start partaking in bad stuff on the idea that, you mentioned things like grandiosity. I think the idea of people never telling you no can kind of warp your brain. And so if everybody tells you yes all the time, then again, if you're in this middle, or if you're obviously just a bad person, then you can move towards this kind of negative antisocial behavior. I think the exception, the very rare people, are the ones that can be given everything and be never told no, and still yet maintain the humility, maintain the humanity to still treat people in a way that, we would treat people in a way that they would want to be treated, so to speak. So I think that it's more of it's difficult to remain. If you're a person that handles people's money and you think there are so many people accused of financial crimes that handle people's money, it's well, how are so many people in this industry getting caught for this type of stuff? Well, if they're not an exceptional person, in my opinion, that can be given that kind of responsibility, particularly once they're given that responsibility and they think, or it becomes apparent that they're not going to get caught, at least in any short term, for doing any kind of impropriety, then they still won't do it. And I think that's really what's being observed here more than anything, is that Diddy was either just a bad guy already, or what the Bodyguard, interpreting what the Bodyguard was saying, is that he was a guy that wasn't necessarily a bad guy, but he was definitely influenceable to that direction once he got the grandiosity, once people stopped telling him no, and once he started seeing what he could get away with. He didn't have that exceptional quality to govern himself and be all right, even though I could get away with this, I'm not going to try to get away with it.
Yeah. I mean, look, that could all be true. I mean, that's my point. I mean, I don't know if that story from his days at Howard University was true or not. Maybe he was a great guy before he became famous. Maybe he wasn't. But I do agree that obviously people can get in a situation and the goalpost for them emotionally and mentally gets moved a bit. And maybe, 10 years after founding Bad Boy Records, he behaved much differently than he would have thought he would behave when he was younger. All that could be true. But I do think this idea of never being told no, that's a good point to kind of reflect on, because I think that's where people like this get themselves in trouble, because everybody's told no at some point. The question is, do you try and go around it, or do you say, okay, this door shut for me, this person told me no? I see it a lot in the financial world with taxes. Where I see people that complain, I paid so much taxes and my accountant's not doing this. And then if I kind of start looking in, or I refer them to a different accountant, then the new accountant's telling me the same thing that their old accountant said, hey man, this is as much we can get. And then the client might still be mad. And at some point I'm looking at the client look, dude, the IRS got rules. You either gonna have to abide by them, or if you actually don't want to listen to anyone and you want to do it your way, then you're going to have to deal with some consequences if you ever get audited or something happens. And I think that's what happens to people like Diddy, because especially when you're young, especially when you start young, when you're in your 20s, early 30s, you got lawyers, accountants, people advising you that are older than you. And they're trying to tell you, hey, man, you can do this, you can do that.
But they all work for you. And a lot of them want to stay working for you. Yeah.
I agree. And that's what I mean. Some people will say, you know what? If you're going to do that way, you're going to fire me, then I guess I got to go and be fired. And you're right. Other people, like an example to me, I'm just thinking now in my head, the medical doctors who gave Michael Jackson and Prince separately, obviously, the concoction of drugs that ended up killing the guys. I think Michael Jackson's doctor was being paid $150,000 a month. And we're talking back in 2010, right? When that was more money than it is today. So yeah, I'm sure Michael Jackson went through a few doctors And there's probably doctors that, look, man, I know you want all this stuff,
This
but
is
I'm not
crazy, bro. I'm not doing this.
I'm not going to give up my license. And I did it.
Yeah.
And then he finally, it's like kissing, the old story, kissing a frog until you find a prince. He went through enough doctors. He finally found one that said, yeah, I'll make 1.8 million a year and take a chance. And by the time the doctor got busted, maybe he's got 7-8 million bucks in the bank, and it's worth it that he's going to go to jail for 2 years over this. Or maybe it's not. And I think probably Diddy's advisors and people around him made similar calculations. All right, this guy's going crazy, but I want to get paid, so I'm not going to tell him no. So I think it's not always just that they're not listening. It's not always that there's only yes men around them. Is men like that end up going to only putting yes men around themselves.
They shop,
and then they get it.
They shop for yes men. Like somebody starts telling them no, and it's like, all right, well, I got to get rid of this guy because I don't want to hear that. And so, I mean, I think again, I think this conversation is much.
Hold on, I got a joke. That's why at the end of the Trump administration, the first term, it was the My Pillow guy that was the only one left advising him, right? Because seriously, they're really serious.
And all these lawyers with all these sanctions.
People were like, man, I'm out. Like just this guy, because he kept going to other people that.
No. I mean, and the people he ended up with are all these lawyers have sanctions on them now and all this. Like it's an interesting comparison in that sense. But yes, I mean, like you end up shopping for like, okay, well, if this person tells me no, I'm gonna go to somebody else who won't tell me no, or whatever. So. I think, again, like it can't be emphasized enough. This is not to excuse Diddy's behavior. I think it's, again, really just looking at society itself and how we interact with each other. And are we behaving in a way, or are these structures set up in a way that move people? Like, obviously, there's nothing we can do other than create punishment for people that are just going to do bad no matter what. Like we're not the society we have. How we're conducive to either promoting good and all that stuff. Those people are going to figure out how to do bad no matter what. But the people who can be kind of go, where one way or go the other way, we want to make sure to the extent we can, like within the context of a free society, that our systems don't promote or kind of incentivize them to move towards the negative side. And so that's really the question is that you're looking at. And again, the music industry, whether it be the music industry, the church, televangelists or, whatever, like, we do see these situations where people in positions of a lot of power, a lot of wealth, and or a lot of influence and celebrity, where they may go from behaving one way to behaving in another way, and if they do, they have to be held accountable. No question about that. But on the next round, the next looking forward, then is there anything we can do? Because that's the other question: is even if we identify this, maybe this just how people behave amongst celebrity, amongst fame, and just like there's enough people that are just going to be googly eyed, but that we can acknowledge this, and it's still going to happen.
Well, I think that's where you can break it up a bit. You've got the part that's about humans, right, and that's where we're talking about the idea of power and people, and I think that's why it's dangerous sometimes that we focus, this is just a celebrity crowd and all that. No, this is and traditionally men, I mean, I'm sure some women have an example historically too, but most of the time it's men. When men get to certain types of personalities, and men, when they get to a certain level of power, have this feeling of grandiosity. And like we've been talking about, right? They'll shop around whoever's around them until they have nothing but people that tell them yes. And some men can survive a whole lifetime like that and get away with it, and others don't. And so I think that, because think about it, James, one of the things that we have today, which is being applied here, is the law. I mean, I wrote down a few names as I was thinking of it: Jeffrey Epstein, R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, Donald Trump in the case of the E. Jean Carroll case and the Stormy Daniels case. Meaning the law has caught up with certain men that have behaved certain ways. And that's actually progress if you're talking about the defense of women and other vulnerable people who've been around affected by these men. Because I start thinking,
those surely aren't the first men ever to behave like this.
That's where I'm getting at. I'm thinking of, okay, let's go back to a monarchy in the 1700s. I'm pretty sure men at the top were getting away with a lot, and women and everyone else had to put. How about a plantation owner in the Deep South in the 1820s? What were they doing on their plantation of people, right? So right now we live in an era. I mean, I have a question of, this guy's been doing this 30 years. Why is it all coming to a head now? But that's obviously details that aren't for this show. But it's just one of those where I feel like that's reality, and that's been going on for human history. The other part that kind of concerns me with our media ecosystem, but it's part of the human thing too, is like when my wife first saw this a few months ago on the news, the first thing she says to me is, well, how come it's always these guys in entertainment? And then I'm the one telling her, nah, there's people on Wall Street behaving like this and people in the Catholic Church and, other things doing this too. But it's the salaciousness of it which gets us all looking. And that's what I've tried not to do. Like,
well, the salaciousness also the name. Like, if it was some anonymous hedge fund manager, it wouldn't get the same number of clicks as...
And that goes back to the gossip and the voyeurism, because that's like, as I was preparing for this discussion today, the amount of articles I made sure to avoid that had all the headlines. Oh, Ashton Kutcher was at the one party and LeBron James at another and Jay-Z and Beyonce, because that's what everyone wants to see. Who are the celebrities? Just like they want to see the Jeffrey Epstein list of who was at the island or who was on the plane. But you're right. No one cares to go down. I mean, what was it? The Archdiocese of Illinois the Attorney General just charged them like a year ago they proved that they had like 2,500 kids being molested from like 1970 to 2018, recently. And that does barely makes the news because we don't know who the Catholic priests are. They're not famous. We don't hear about all these famous people. Yeah. So it really is a reflection, you're right, on us as a society that we tend to stop when it's these famous people. But when it's actually happening through other parts of society, we're okay with the church just moving priests around. Or with the police officers even, it's not just the brutality, but we've read about police officers who will make sexual advances on teenagers and they just get moved to different precincts. So, we seem to accept or look the other way for one part of society, but when it's people that are famous on TV, we're like, wow, we gotta.
Well, I don't think we look the other way. It's more so we just don't fixate on it. Like nobody's banging the table or some people are, I should say. If you bring in the law enforcement,
a minority of people are.
If you bring in the law enforcement piece, that does cloud it. But in general, you don't have masses of people banging the table that these people should be let off. It's just more so it doesn't capture the imagination or the attention. And I think that's something that it's one of those things where if we can do better, then we should try to do better. But I think you raised a good point, just that. It's progress, actually, that the law actually is doing something about this and these types of things more now than it has in the past. And so, maybe along the current trajectory, we can continue to push these types of things and make sure law enforcement is involved, because what that does, generally speaking, is create the incentive to not behave like this for the people who may be in the middle and could say, oh, well, nobody's telling me no, but this guy got caught, that guy got caught. Maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should lean more into, because that's an incentive, a negative incentive to try to get people to not do this type of stuff. Again, it's not going to affect the people that they're going to do dirt no matter what, but the people that can be influenced, and that there are many societal structures in place to influence them maybe to lean more towards the negative way. This is the kind of societal structure that can influence them to lean more in the positive, or to not lean in the negative way, or to stay neutral, or maybe even lean positive. So, I think that's kind of the takeaway more than anything. And so,
I got something for you.
Well, let's get out. But let me say this. In that sense, it is something that's important to see, when somebody like Diddy behaves like this and the law holds him to account. Even if we're pointing at the fact that, this happens and people, it doesn't always get prosecuted or whatever, but at least it happens sometimes. And the fact that it happens in a way that's very public could be, helpful from a negative incentive society-wide.
Yeah, so I just my point, closing piece is so my 13-year-old kid has a science fair coming up when he's going to build, I think it's like a solar powered car that's going to be able to race. But I'm going to suggest after this show we do a new experiment where his dad, me, is going to release an album, and at the same time I'm going to play the Powerball and win it, so that I'm like worth $1 billion and I have an album out, and then we're going to see how I behave for the next 24 months. And that's going to be the science experiment.
You yourself, you're going to be our test
and
mouth?
If I'm still married and my wife still likes me, then I was able to hold it together. And if I'm divorced and I got lawsuits up the yin yang, then it shows that this. It shows that the money will change you and the fame and all that. No,
it said the money. It doesn't show that the money will change you. It shows that the money will change you.
Yeah,
Tunde Ogunlana.
But that'll be our science experiment.
That'll prove that you were one of the people that your circumstances could influence you to move to the negative side. Versus, hey, but if a couple more people get popped, even if you do that, you might still lean to the not lean to the negative side. So, but I appreciate you.
I won't call Diddy for advice. That's what I can promise.
I appreciate you volunteering to be the guinea pig, though, man. That's your good deed for society.
No, I'm calling Donald Trump to get out of all the trouble. I'm gonna call, hey man, how do I do this?
Tough line Tunde, man. Tough line Tunde. So, but no, we appreciate everybody for joining us on this call out. Check out our earlier show to release today as well, discussing the Shirley Chisholm movie from Netflix. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.